Hey friends, in today's video, I'm going to attempt an acrylic painting for the first time in 20 years. Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back. My name is Shayda Campbell, and on this channel we make art and it's fun, not scary. Chris and Sully and I recently visited an antique mall. I never miss a chance to go antiquing, thrifting, or if I see like a nice pile of garbage on the side of the road, I will stop. So I found quite a treasure. It's this wonderful antique frame. It's floral, it's gold, it goes with the living room. And I have this vision of a moody, dark, vintage, antique floral. Yeah, I have a specific vision. So I decided to do one myself, and that's what today's video is all about. It kind of has to be an acrylic or an oil, and so I'm getting out the acrylic paints for the first time in a couple decades. In recent years, I've only used acrylics to do stuff on the channel like the Christmas ornaments, the Joe Malone perfume bottle. Those are great videos, you can check them out, but I haven't done a painting, and that's what I'm going to attempt today. Now, disclaimer, this is not as much of a tutorial as I normally produce. So don't try to sit down and just paint along because I'm like, backtrack, let's paint over that, let's change that, let's try this. You're going to see me attempt something where I'm a little out of my comfort zone, but if you have been wanting to kind of diverge and take a new path with your art and you've been a little afraid, because I get how that feels, then this is the video for you, because you can work out all your fears by watching me make all these crazy mistakes and fix them and learn from them. And I do have a lot of good tips and tricks for you if you're starting with acrylics. And since we're talking about art for the home in this video, it seems like a good time to mention that my print shop is now open. This has been a long time coming, but I'm so excited to share that you can now purchase prints of my watercolor floral paintings. The print shop is open at shaydacampbell.com. There are a few sizes available and we're working towards having lots more. And I also have a few original paintings available as well. I tried my best to produce pieces that I would want in my own home, and I have been placing them all over the house as I shoot the content for these videos and for Instagram, and I hope you'll love them as much as I do. I can't quite say why I haven't done this in years past after getting so many requests for prints. I guess maybe it was a confidence thing, but being settled in my own home and with spring on the horizon now really feels like the perfect time, and I can't wait for you to shop these prints and enjoy them in your own home. That means the world to me, and as always, thank you so much for your support and for supporting my art, my work, and my dreams. So let me start by showing you everything that I'm using for my project today. I've got my frame there, and it is an 8x10 size, so I have an 8x10 little canvas board. I'm going to unwrap it, and it already has the gesso on it, so it's prepped and primed and ready to go. I have my acrylic paints, as well as a number of synthetic paint brushes. I have 2 glasses of clean water, paper towel for wiping my brush on. For reference, I have a wonderful library book called the Flower Recipe Book, and I've chosen an arrangement that I'm going to paint or base my painting on. I have some scrap paper or sketchbook, tracing paper, graphite transfer paper, and then we need a fine liner or Sharpie, a pencil and eraser, and that's about it other than our palette. So let's move all this stuff out of the way, and I'll show you what I'm using as a palette. I'm going to try using a paper palette. That way I don't have to clean up my paints. This is a back of an old paper pad. It's a nice smooth piece of cardboard. But you can use whatever you want as a palette, an old plate, a piece of glass. To begin this project, we need to get that sketchbook back out, trace your canvas board so you have your 8x10 kind of area set up. And then we're going to look at our photo here, and I am going to sketch it, but I'm not going to sketch everything. I'm going to make up my own arrangement based on what I'm looking at in the library book. First thing I do is always a guide, so just figuring out about how large do I want the vase, about how large do I want the cluster of flowers at the top. Then I start adding a few details like the water line and the highlight on the vase and the stems. And then knowing the size that I want the arrangement to be, I begin to refine my guide by adding more circles, one for each flower. And the first one is going to be that big white rose on the right-hand side, and I'm just kind of sketching in some lines where the petals will sit. And then I got to work on the other 3 flowers that I wanted to include. They're all anemones. So it's the anemone on the left, and then the one in the middle, and the one that's kind of sitting up above the arrangement. So I didn't want to include all of the flowers I was looking at. I wanted to simplify a little bit. I'm going for this kind of vintage vibe. I don't want things to get overly complicated. I want to use a somewhat impressionistic painting style, and I'm not going to do a lot of small detail. However, I'm trying my best to at least just sketch out the entire arrangement so that I kind of know what I'm doing when I start painting. So the nice thing is you can sketch your arrangement in pencil and then you're not done. You're going to continue refining that sketch. And the first step in refining is to go over it with a pen. You know, you can make some small changes, just make the flowers look a little better. And then you continue the process of refining by tracing it. So once again, you're able to make little changes. And I felt that my arrangement was a little too slim. I wanted it to take up more space. So you can see me just shifting the tracing paper slightly, and my arrangement is getting larger. The flowers are a little farther away from one another, and they're taking up more space on the canvas. With our drawing finalized, we're now ready to transfer it to the canvas board. So you're going to tape it in place on the canvas, put that graphite transfer paper underneath, dark side down, and then take a nice sharp implement like a mechanical pencil and trace over the entire drawing. One more time. Lift it up, make sure you haven't missed anything. If you have, just trace over what you missed, and then you're ready to lift all of that off, and you've got a nice transferred image ready for painting. So let's talk about how we begin the process of painting acrylics. You're going to take any color you want, although burnt sienna is a good choice and a popular choice. And we are going to do what we call toning the canvas or tinting the canvas. What I'm doing here is just taking water and I'm spreading that paint out in a nice thin layer. We can still see the image underneath. In fact, I had a little too much paint, so I just blotted with paper towel a little bit. Now I've got a tinted canvas that is ready for paint, and I don't have to worry about painting on this bright white surface, and it's going to be a wonderful base for the rest of my paint colors. So toning the canvas is a simple yet meaningful part of the acrylic painting process. So to begin our painting, I decided I would start with the vase or the jar. I'm using 3 colors to start here: ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and Payne's gray. Oh, and then I put a little bit of sap green as well. But burnt umber and ultramarine blue, when you mix them, actually give you a really wonderful dark black. So what I'm saying is I can use the burnt umber, the dark brown color that it is, to paint the vase or the jar. I can mix in a little ultramarine blue to darken and make a darker brown, or I can mix in enough blue to actually get black. And maybe I do want black right up at the top of the jar underneath the flowers. So I'm just filling in. And I had a little extra paint that I had mixed. I didn't want to waste it, so I just used it to kind of darken the corners a little bit up at the top of the canvas, because we're going for this vintage vibe, this very moody, dark floral that I hope is going to look great in my living room. Remember, this video is part tutorial, but it's also just part story. Me showing you what it was like to pick up acrylics after 20 years away from them and try to do something that is out of my comfort zone. So I want to show you as much as possible and give you some tips and tricks, but you're also going to see me make mistakes and just struggle with getting the painting to look the way I really want it to. You know when you have something in your head, a vision in your head, but you just can't quite get it on the paper or the canvas? Yeah, that's me today. So you're watching that. But what I'm doing here, for anyone that's wondering, is I put a little thin line of burnt umber through the stems to show where the water is. And then I'm taking white and I just did some little highlights. Large highlight on the right, very, very small highlight on the left. And then if you look at the image in the library book, you can see there's a bit of a highlight on the rim of that jar. It doesn't look exactly the way I want it to look, but we're just going to keep moving and working and filling in some of the other areas. Now, one thing I didn't mention when I showed you my library book and the reference image was that I actually don't want to paint white flowers. I want to paint some moody, dark, colorful flowers. So I'm going to use some purple, some pink, and I'm beginning to fill in the 4 main flowers. I have 1 rose and 3 anemones, and they're all going to be some shade of violets and magentas and blush pink. The thing here is that I started painting and I was getting some small details like the dark petals and the light petals and the shadow. And frankly, first of all, one thing that I started to really not like is that my flowers are too small, and I had made the vase a little larger just because I wanted it to look a little bit more bulbous. And then the flowers just look so small in comparison to the jar. And so I'm not loving that as I'm painting. I'm just telling you what's going through my mind as I paint here, as I paint with acrylics on camera for the first time in 20 years. So my flowers are just looking a bit small. But what I also am annoyed at myself, is that they just look a little too detailed. Not saying they look too good. That's not what I mean. I mean, they have a bit too much detail, and I want to do this very gestural, loose, impressionistic acrylic floral that just has this look of this French painter back at the turn of the 20th century that was just using a simple brush stroke to paint a petal, and everything is just very free and loose, but it looks great. You know, when you see an old painting and the perspective is a little forced, like the flowers are so big compared to the vase, and the colors are simple, and there's not a lot of detail, but it just looks great. It just looks fun. You see a lot of still lifes done in that style that just sing, that remind you of Picasso or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyways, that's not what this is, and it's not going in the right direction. And it was around this time that I also started to realize that I hate working on a paper palette. Now, the reason you would use a paper palette for acrylics is because you can just throw it out afterwards, and acrylics dry to a hard plastic-like finish. They're wonderful to paint with. You can mix them with water, and that's how you thin your acrylics. See, this is a tutorial still. It's a little bit of a tutorial. You don't actually have to buy any of the crazy mediums that you see sitting next to the acrylics at the art store. You'll see all these mediums: gel, matte, gloss, texture. All of those mediums are meant to do just what they say, like help you add texture and body to the painting, help you get a glossy finish or a matte finish. But you don't need any of that, especially when you're starting out. All you need is water to help you thin the acrylics and get them to be the consistency that you like. And frankly, my acrylics just felt very dry, and then working on a dry cardboard palette was compounding that issue. So it's around this point that I'm just like, what am I doing? So I decided to fill in the entirety of the backdrop, because I was like, okay, that will make me happy. I want this dark, moody background. And in fact, the reference material is really great. That's another reason I like this book, was because all the flowers were shot against this nice gray, dark setting. And so I thought, okay, if I can just fill in, that'll make me happy and I'll start to like what I'm doing. But surprise, it only made it worse. I realized something is not right about the way I've done the background. I did this weird like chiaroscuro, like everything in the corners is super dark, and then it looks like a spotlight is shining down on my flowers, which is so not cool and just doesn't look good. It looks like my flowers are on stage and they're about to give a speech or sing a song. So here's what I did. I just put the paintbrush down, I washed my brushes, I went and had lunch, I took an hour, and I came back. And I have a new desk set up. I am not going to use the paper palette. It's still there if I need it, but I'm going to use a plastic palette. And I'm going to do something that I should have done before I started, which is a sketch in color. And I've already kind of refined my drawing, so now I want to work out the colors and some of the shapes of those colors. So I'm sketching it in again using pen. Start with the circles, then you can turn each circle into a flower. I realized I didn't make my rectangle quite large enough, so that's an easy fix. And then I'm going to take some of these markers, and I'm going to start drawing in things like the shadow. So the highlight is on the right-hand side of the glass. I'm going to put the shadow of the vase on the left. There's going to be some shadow on the left behind the flowers, as well as a little bit on the right. And then there's going to be more light coming down from above. We're not going to have this weird spotlight effect. We're going to have some green in between the flowers. We're going to still have a very dark vase. but the flowers themselves are just going to be made up of some simple, confident brush strokes. I mean, we'll see. I'm gonna try. There we go. That's more what I want it to look like. The shading, the shadow, where the light sits is now defined, and I've worked it out. So a little more prep, a little more planning, and a break and some lunch. Never a bad thing. Now I'm starting to mix up the color that I want to use for the table, but I'm mixing it in my plastic palette, and that makes it a lot easier to mix in water. And look at the beautiful consistency of my paint. I'm using burnt umber, burnt sienna, and Payne's gray. I can still put some paint on my paper palette, but when I mix the actual paint that I want to use on my canvas, well, this palette is allowing me to mix water in and get the paint to my perfect consistency before I even put it on the canvas board, and that's making all the difference. I'm going to refer to my sketch, my new marker sketch sitting on my left here, and I'm going to start putting in a bit of a shadow because the flowers, they need to kind of exist within my space. So I have to put the shadow there on the left, and I'm going to finish painting the table, kind of making it really dark, really moody. The nice thing about having the wetter paints is they also are mixing really, really nicely on the canvas, and I'm actually starting to enjoy the painting process. Before I just felt frustrated. So now I'm working with those three colors, the two browns, Payne's gray. I've added a bit of white to the palette, still mixing in lots of water, and you can see how the consistency has really changed. I'm just starting over with the backdrop, and I want everything to be this moody gray brown. So using, again, burnt sienna, burnt umber with the Payne's gray and the white, lots of water. And I just want everything to look very painterly. I don't know what the other word would be. I want you to see the brush strokes. I want this painting to look like a painting, like a piece of art. I'm not going for realism, just like with my watercolors. I want everything to look really loose and look like I, the artist, interpreted what I saw in my library book. And that's my purpose here, is to interpret the photograph into a really fun, playful piece of art. And having that plastic palette and mixing more water in, it's making this so much more fun. And you can see now I've got a backdrop for these flowers that I think really works. I've got the dark shadow on the left. Everything's a little brighter up above. We can see some shadow on the table. And now I'm going to begin kind of repainting these flowers. I want to make them larger, and I want to really simplify. And actually, I want to change the colors a little. It's a little too pink and purple. I want more like dark, moody violet and burgundy and red. And I definitely just want them to look like they've been done in just a few simple brush strokes, like this anemone at the top on the angle. I think almost what I've just done there, where I just covered it in a few simple brush strokes. It looks so much better to me already. It's heading in the direction that I am seeking. Some of you are going to enjoy the first flowers I painted, and that's okay. It's just not the style I'm going for. I want to hang this in my home, and I want it to read like a real painting, like something that was done by someone who had the skill to paint flowers as they are in a really realistic way, but that chose to paint them in an almost childlike way. That's just the type of thing that I would like to look at every day. Now, I'm already overcomplicating them because painting something in a really, really simple style is deceptively difficult. Trying to just get the essence of the rose with all those layers of petals in a few good brush strokes is really, really hard, but I'm going to keep working on it. And I wanted to say that this video, it's always harder to make a video about something that I'm not confident with. It's easy to make a tutorial where I just say, here's step 1 through 5, follow them, paint like me, it's going to be great. Showing you all my mistakes and my struggles, that's a much more difficult YouTube video to produce. But the reason I really want to show you this is because I follow a lot of other artists online. So I'm constantly watching reels and YouTube shorts where I'm seeing someone pick up a paintbrush and they just go and do it. And it's great. They don't make any mistakes. It's just start to finish a masterpiece. And every day I see tons of these videos. And that's not usually my process. I usually have to do a lot of prep, and I might have to paint something 2 or 3 times, maybe more. And just don't forget, if that's your process, that's okay. And there's like 32 layers on the Mona Lisa or something like that. So don't feel bad if you have to repaint. And hey, this isn't watercolor. We can just paint over it. So that is a good thing. I'm grateful for that with these acrylics today. So all in all, this acrylic painting took me about 3.5, 4 hours of time to produce. And what you're seeing me do here is just try to fix all the things that I was talking about. Like I'm trying to make the whole arrangement look a little larger. I am trying to make it look more painterly and slightly abstracted. And I'm trying to show the shapes of the rose and the anemones in a way that feels realistic and that feels sophisticated, but that is also super simple. So I don't want to paint like every little rose petal. I just want it to say, yeah, that's a rose, but to do it in the least amount of brush strokes. And I did add some kind of like a hypericum berry on both sides to help balance the floral arrangement and to make it larger as well, and to kind of take up more space on the canvas, because I did feel like everything was just a little too small. But now I'm actually quite happy with the way things are going. I'm getting there with it, and that's a good feeling. You know, when I went and had lunch, I was like, I just feel like I'm not doing what I set out to do. I'm not doing my beautiful, perfect vintage dark, moody floral in a simplistic, semi-abstracted style. But by taking a breather, switching up my palette, and doing that little marker sort of planning sketch, I really got back on track and was able to make something that I was super happy with and very proud of. And, you know, this is my first painting in like 20 years, so I would have to say, not too bad, not too shabby. And I hope that empowers you to try something that scares you or that you've been wanting to try as well. I finished my afternoon of painting by signing the piece, cleaning up my desk, and then I grabbed my $50 antique frame and I just looked at the piece as a whole, because it was always meant to have this beautiful frame, and I just fell in love with it. Doesn't that look so nice? You can kind of get the vibe in the room. I think it fits in here so well. And although I would have loved to purchase an antique piece from a little French shop on Etsy, and maybe one day I will, I'm really happy with this, and I'm happy that I attempted something that kind of scared me. Moral of the story, it's never too late to plan and prep the piece you're working on, even if it's halfway finished. So let's hang this up.